Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
I'm stuck. He's making cut with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It is another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1. Our podcast that we do, of course, throughout the F1 season. Alex, Kirry, Dan Jimenez. Thanks for being with us on the program, everybody. Dan, what's up, man? Everything good in your world?
Yeah, just busier than you know what, but it's a good time of the year for being a sports fan.
It is. It's a really good time. And, you know, we've got a lot that we're jamming on. And I just had, like, it's a normal thing now to hear somebody say, oh, I'm actually going to go to the F1 race in Austin. Oh, I'm going to go to the F1 race. And I've got a buddy who I would have never pegged for ever going to any of that stuff. Like, I just was, like, looking at it, and I was like, and he goes, yeah, I'm going on like a guy's trip to down to Austin with some guys I went to medical school with, and I was like, "You are, huh? Okay, good. There you go. You know." And so
That's
people are
awesome.
getting into it, man. It's happening, and of course Vegas is coming up in a month or so. We got a couple of races to review still. We got to go back in time just a little bit, and I think it'll be worth going back to Baku because I'm watching that race unfold, and to see Carlos and Checo go into the wall. What lap was that? Did they have 2 more laps left?
It's 3 to go, maybe.
3 to go.
2 to
maybe?
go.
But this was a battle for, because really, if Checo could have kept his crap together, he probably would have ended at the very least. This was for 3rd place on the podium.
Yeah,
which he was going to get, and he really could have run down Chuck Leclerc for 2nd. And instead, they both go into the wall, and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. But what it did was it set off a chain reaction for me to have an Argentine driver score points for the first time in like 40 years. So Colapinto is the newest driver on the grid for Williams. But now, of course, this week, not even the newest driver. He's like old hat because Liam Lawson's going to take over for a retiring Daniel Ricciardo. We'll get into that. But Piastri got the win in Baku, and I'm always fascinated by that Baku race because it's a beautiful race. It looks awesome. It seems like it would be difficult as all get out to try to drive on that racetrack, and these guys do a phenomenal job, at least till the very last part. And but Oscar Piastri notching another win, and everybody else looking around going, "What's up, Lando Norris? What are you doing, man?" And I know they ran down officially. I think they ran down that race, Red Bull, in the constructors' standings, but Lando not doing himself any favors that first week or a couple weeks ago in Baku.
Yeah, it's crazy that since Miami, Lando has gained, I think, net like less than 5 points on Max since Miami. It's just, you would think that they were just so dominant during this whole period for the last however many 10 races or so that's been. But they just Lando hasn't capitalized. And that was another example. He had the issue in qualifying outside of his control where I think it was Gasly. Gasly caused the yellow flag in that last sector that got Lando caught out so that he didn't qualify or make it into even Q2. And so, you know, he did the best he could and clawed his way back for, I think he finished right in front of Max. I think he gained a point on Max, but that's another example of, you know, if he had been an Oscar situation, qualified, you know, top 5 and raced to a podium finish, he should have taken 10 points out of Max's lead. And just another opportunity missed, and another instance where Oscar just shows that he is every bit as good, if not better, or on a faster trajectory towards success than Lando was. Oscar is the absolute real deal.
It is crazy to see because then you have, of course, last week in Singapore where Lando gets it right back. And McLaren is not just a quick team. They're by far the best team right now, which is crazy to think. Like they're pulling away in the Constructors title. I think that Lando has to run down 8 points every race, basically from Max. And I think the thing that is going to make it to where it could happen, I mean, there's still a lot that needs to be figured out. Obviously, it's not going to be an easy one. But they were like, well, if Max Verstappen, if Lando finished first in every race, that still wouldn't be enough to beat Max if Max finishes second every race. And I was like, well, Lando could actually be at the top of every race. The Red Bull is not a first place finishing or even a podium finishing car half of these races. And so that's the part where you should be nervous if you are if you're Helmut Marko, because even your golden boy might end up losing this championship because you guys can't put it together on a race weekend. Even when your second driver is having a phenomenal weekend, they end up putting it in the wall and get 0 points out of him in Baku. And then, obviously he got second this past weekend in Singapore. But man, I don't know. I want it to be like within 2 or 3 points or 5 or whatever in that last race, just to make that last race more exciting for me. And maybe somehow Lewis Hamilton is able to affect the outcome of that race, just to give it a little to
Could you imagine? Yeah, could you imagine? That would be insane. It's gonna be close. Yeah, I mean, there are 4 sprint races left, I think, too.
Oh wow.
3 or 4. Like, they saved all of them for the last of the season, and I don't know if that was strategic, but those are other opportunities for Lando to catch.
How many points?
Max,
how many points
they
do you
pay
get?
out points?
Yeah, how many points
I
do you
think
get on a
they
win?
pay 8. I think only the top 8 get points, and it goes in reverse order. So 8th for first, 7th for second, and so on. So it's not like if you finish second to first, you gain 8 points, on the person in second, like in a regular race. But if Max has a DNF in one of those, Lando could catch up pretty quick.
Even if it's Lando getting first and Max getting 5th in the sprint race, and then the next day you have something similar, then you're talking about being able to catch up in all sorts of crazy ways. And so, okay, I'm all for it. I'm all in on a Red Bull meltdown. I was reading the other day, I think about how, development is obviously pushed a lot right now. Money and development talks and all that stuff is all 2026 talk within these teams right now. But they have to balance it, because they're like, if you're McLaren, you have to still focus quite a bit on how to run down and make sure that you win that constructors title, because you're talking about $20 million on the line, difference between first and second place in the constructors title. But they were saying that Red Bull is probably putting on hold some of their 2026 development that they'd normally be jumping into, because right now they're focusing on trying to figure out how to not to lose this thing.
Yeah, I believe it. This time last year, they had completely stopped developing their 2023 car, and we're already starting on the 2024 car. Mm-hmm. And there's no way that they could afford to do that right now, because it's going to be razor thin to not just hold on to like Max's championship, but like even the constructors standings. We should check on. I mean, Ferrari is 34 points behind Red Bull in the constructors. And
they're going to run them down.
If Sergio's running 8th to 10th and Max is running 3rd to 6th,
oh boy,
Ferrari can run him down too. Leclerc was incredibly fast in Singapore.
Yeah.
If he hadn't had his poor qualifying, he was as fast as Lando, much faster than Max, who finished second. So Ferrari is on their A game right now as well. Austin, the next race is going to be very interesting. Are we going to see a return to Max running 5th, 6th, or was this second kind of surprising second place run in Singapore kind of the new standard where Max is back up to fighting for podiums? That's what we're going to have to wait and see in Austin.
So let's go over a little bit of what happened in that Singapore race. And this is a racetrack you've been to. I think you went, 2 years ago?
Oh, yeah. 2 years ago, yeah.
And it's not a good Red Bull track historically, because I think the only race that Red Bull lost all of last year was at the Marina Bay Street Circuit. So Max does pull off second place, which is huge, obviously. But Lando, I mean, imagine this team being at the very back of the grid last year at the beginning of the season, and now beating a Red Bull driven by Max Verstappen by 21 seconds. And it could have been more.
Yeah, the margin of victory was so dominant. It's what we were getting used to with Max when they were super dominant last year. He's just nowhere close. 21 seconds behind Oscar fought back. I thought that Oscar was going to catch Max more in that last stint than he did. But Charles chased down Max in the first stint. I thought I saw like 25 seconds from lap 1 to whenever they pit in that first stint. So that, Charles was as fast as Lando in that, but it's that Singapore circuit is hot. That's like the only word to describe it, is just, I've never been hotter in my life, and I've lived in some pretty hot places in my life. I've never been hotter than 10:30 at night in Singapore. And those drivers, they said it on the broadcast, the drivers were just facing the biggest physical challenge of the season. And that there's lots of opportunities for missteps, and, Max held constant, and hard on the tires, hard on the body. And, he's got, I think, a second place finish in a car that probably should have been, Sergio was nowhere to be seen. He was fighting for 10th. He couldn't get past Franco Colapinto, and I think that the difference between Max and Sergio's talent level was on display too.
So Singapore and Baku, very different tracks than what we're going to see in Austin. The street circuit and Singapore is a hard place to pass. Baku's a tough place to pass. And they're just very different. So how does this set up, I guess, the rest of the way for McLaren? Is it favorable for Red Bull to have kind of these more traditional racetrack, Grand Prix versus like the street circuit ones? Or do these kind of benefit? When you look at the schedule, do you look and say, oh no, Red Bull might be favorable in some of these other ones, or might be able to hang on to these points over here? Or at this point, is McLaren quick kind of on any track?
I think they're quick on every track, and I don't think that going back to these more standard medium to high downforce tracks is going to really help Red Bull at all. You look back at, Monza's a bit of an outlier, but Netherlands, Belgium, Hungary, Max was not fast in Great Britain. He wasn't fast at any of those. So I don't see any of these upcoming tracks, Austin, Mexico, or Brazil, the next triple header, being favorable to Red Bull in any way. I just think it's going to be more McLaren domination. And this needs to be when Lando makes the real run and gets gets 10.8 point chunks each race. And three races from now, we're looking at a sub 20 point deficit.
I'm trying to imagine a scenario where Oscar Piastri was driving for Alpine this year.
Oh my gosh, man! What a contract decision that was for Oscar.
I know it looked bad. It looked bad at the moment, like where you're like, "Oh, kid, come on, man! This makes you look bad." I've never signed anything with anybody. I'm not going to any team. And now you look at it and you go, "Boy, you absolutely dodged a freaking bullet there, dude."
Yeah. And, on the other half of it, Daniel Ricciardo not, getting, losing his seat at McLaren. And then now in the news this week, which we should probably talk about.
Well, this is what I was going to bring up, because Danny Rick has been unceremoniously. It was weird because I think they showed in the pits when he came in, finishing 18th. And like they were kind of doing like the, like they do at my kids' football game where they have everybody standing on both sides and like going, yay, even if you lose. And so that's what it felt like.
Did the parent tunnel?
Yes.
Sticking the hands up. Yeah.
RB, VCARD, whatever. They did the parent tunnel, and it was awkward as hell. And on top of it, then afterward, all the people are going, so is this your last race in F1? Was that your last race? And it just seems like Danny Rick, for all the stuff that he did for F1, like you needed a better send off than a Singapore GP, and then being unceremoniously replaced by Liam. What is his name? Liam Lawson? Is that what it is? Liam Lawson.
Liam Lawson, yeah.
Not Liam Neeson.
The story arc of Red Bull being the villains on the grid just continues to build. Because everyone loves Danny Rick, and they did him dirty with the way that they sent him off without making an official announcement before. And it's like he couldn't, celebrate. It was just weird. weird all around. And I think I'm sure there's Red Bull fans listening to the podcast, and good for you. I'm happy for you, but also like Liam Lawson's going to be exciting, but they totally and completely hosed Danny Rick with his last race.
What's his legacy going to be in the sport? You win 8 races, that's great, but you're also in a time where, he had the potential to be a world champion at some point. Making moves in F1 is hard because you want to get paid, and he's one of the most commercially, sought after assets for a lot of these teams. He goes to Renault, which basically ruins his career. I mean, because you can talk about McLaren being it or whatever, but that Renault move was weird. It was awkward. It was also one of those moments when I was getting into F1 and I was like, what's this guy doing? And then I was like, well, I guess because he can't get along with the guys at Red Bull. And in my mind, because I wasn't familiar with the sport at the time, I just assumed that almost all these cars were created equal, and they're just not, especially at Alpine.
Yeah, it is a weird career. I was looking it up. He has 8 career wins, which ties for 37th all time. So, like, is he like in the kind of, I don't know even know if there's an F1 Hall of Fame, but is he a Hall of Famer? And he's like on the cusp. He's like one of those guys that has to go like 4 years until he finally gets voted in, he's on the cusp. And could he have stretched if he had stayed at Red Bull? I'm sure he would have tacked on a lot more wins than what, the one win that he got after having left Red Bull. It's an odd career because he has such a big personality, and 8 wins in the era of Sebastian Vettel going into Mercedes, going into Max is not nothing. It's not like, there wasn't a ton of competitiveness and parity. Like he squeaked out wins in an era of like, consistent champions.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for that. But I can't put my finger on where you stack him up all time. It's kind of a weird one.
Well, and part of it's, like I said, it's a little bit skewed because from a media standpoint, like all the coverage of him leaving, all the media people are sad about it because he was a phenomenal interview. Everybody liked him around the paddock. I didn't seem like he had very, very many enemies, if any at all, anywhere. And so I guess to have him kind of, booted off a really bad team, by the way, like, I mean, that's the other thing is just you're on the Red Bull junior team and you're just kind of, you never felt like the support was really there or what they were really trying to do with him, because in the end, when he first came over, it was like, oh, you know what they're doing? They want him in that second seat. The reality is that if he gets in Checo's seat like this weekend, does he do better than he does?
That's a great question, because he didn't outperform Yuki enough to make it clear that, okay, you should take Sergio's spot. So they re-signed Sergio, probably because Daniel wasn't as fast as they were hoping him to be. But yeah, if you stick him in Sergio's seat, is he quicker? I don't know.
Maybe. Like
potentially. Maybe.
The reality is
we'll never know.
You put Yuki in his seat and he's faster than probably both of them, and yet he's not getting an opportunity. So that's the part where people are a little bit nervous about. What's Liam Lawson's deal? We've seen him a handful of times in free practice drives and things like that. And I think he's actually racing a couple of actual Grand Prix as a replacement driver, but I don't know. What's his history?
Yeah. He was the fill-in for Danny Rick when Danny Rick broke his hand or his wrist or something last year at Zandvoort. And so I think he raced, was it 4 or 6 races last year? And he did great. He scored points. He didn't wreck the car. He was a very consistent driver, and so everyone was like, well, like, dang, what are you gonna do? Like, he deserves a seat, but Red Bull's not gonna let him go to, say, like a Williams or somebody who might need a fill-in driver for a year because they want to hold on to him. And so he just was having to patiently wait. So Red Bull must still be thinking that Liam is that second driver to replace Sergio, and so put him in now. Get the 6 races in, and then, I guess contractually he was supposed to have 6 races total with Red Bull. And we have how many races left in the season? 7, is it?
7 or 8. Yeah. It's a 20. Yeah. What is it? 24 races this year or whatever it is.
3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 races left.
Okay.
So he has 6 races left. Maybe if he really kills it in these 6 races, there might be, a hot swap with Sergio, even though they say Sergio's contract is through next year. But at a minimum, you got to think that he's driving through next year and he's teeing up for that spot in 2026.
Well, And, the thing that never gets talked about, well, it does, but it comes up last, but it probably actually comes up first in these conversations is how much money that Checo brings to Red Bull. I mean, they're going to go to Mexico. He cleans up there. You know what I mean? Like when they go to the Circuit of the Americas in Mexico, that stint, he absolutely blows it up. I mean, there's a reason he brings so many dollars to the table, and it's not like it's a paid drive, but at the same time, there's a reason that you have some of their biggest sponsorships on both of their cars, courtesy of his relationships there in Mexico. So that's not for nothing. I mean, say what you will about Red Bull. They're like, we're fine. And I don't know, their constructors title, how many times did they win it then? So this would be, if they would have won it this year, it would have been 4, right? 4 in a row. And it would have, and if Max can hold on, this will be his 4th World Championships. Is there a world where Max doesn't ever get back to a World Championship? This could be the end of his run.
Gosh, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I wouldn't have ever thought it. But there's, the other news from this last weekend was the FIA giving Max community service sentence for swearing in the press conference, and Max is just so totally over it.
Right.
And, say what you will about that, but Max is threatened to retire after, he says he doesn't want to do this forever, which nobody can, but it wouldn't surprise me if in 3 to 4 years, if he wasn't in championship form, he moves on to something else where, it interests him more. He might be potentially the greatest of all time who doesn't actually reach it to the 7 or 8 championships, but just calls it early.
What do you think because I'm looking at this and I'm trying to see like what the effect of Max leaving the sport would be and what that would look like, and at the same time, like there's the rumor of him maybe even going to another team, and Mercedes keeps coming up. I don't know what George's situation is. Doesn't he only have like 1 year left on his contract, or it's something like floating out there? Like
I've got it pulled up.
They haven't extended him or something, right? Yeah.
They have both drivers next year at Mercedes are on contract years.
Okay. So I don't think they want to just do 1 year with Kimi Antonelli unless he's absolutely dog next year. But George Russell could lose out on a seat at Mercedes if Max comes up and available, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Let's, Toto keeps dropping it, dropping hints at it. And I think there was a Christian Horner quote saying that Toto just likes to stir up, what, by saying that, and that it's completely, out of the realm of possibility. But I think it's Toto just trying to speak it into existence and getting it out there more. And maybe you incept this idea into Max's brain. If they have another bad year and he doesn't win the championship next year and Mercedes is on par with Red Bull, he might be looking for a mid-career shakeup.
Boy, that would be weird, right? George Russell, Toto's guy, getting kicked to the curb because he's now got 2 different new guys. I mean, my heavens. It's
back to Williams, That's the other driver that's on the hot that needs to be looking around is Albon. He keeps getting outdriven by Colapinto.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Do you put Colapinto in alongside Carlos Sainz instead of Alex?
Well, and that's the thing is Colapinto's like everyone just assumed he was just a gap filler and wouldn't do very well, but like he almost had another point scoring situation this last weekend. I think he was 11th. They go double points. They go 7th and 8th in Baku, and then he gets 11th when Alex DNFs. At Singapore. So, the Colapinto dive bomb in turn 1 was, I didn't see it at the start, and then they had the Albon radio saying like, "What's Colapinto doing?" He dive bombed us. But you go back and look at it, and it was a good, clean move. Yeah,
I mean, he didn't do anything super risky, and that put Albon on the outside of 4 cars, which really hosed him. And I think he collected some type of damage or something during that. That led to the DNF, but it was a super clean move. Colapinto is absolutely the real deal. You heard it from Sergio himself that, he's very good.
It's crazy. Yeah. F1 is getting weird. We got 6 more races left, and we're going to be, of course, on all of them. So, Dan, it's been a fun breakdown here just of a couple of races, and then we're looking forward to, I guess, just a couple weeks off here, and then we're back at it when they go to Circuit of the Americas, right?
Yep, and the triple header in the American continents.
There you go. All right. So for Dan Jimenez, Alex Kirry will be back again in the coming weeks here, either next week or the week after, as we get you ready for Austin. So for Dan, I'm Alex. We'll talk to you next time, everybody.